thoughtful ideas, suggestions for guests and topics.
Great events, programs, the students faculty, all the
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for ACC's TV Dialogue Houston, we're here now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. and Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the hour, we thank you for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on ACC's TV Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show, now proudly in its 30th year. We have a great show planned for you this afternoon. It's one that I've personally been looking forward to because it's so timely in this discussion. And we're so grateful to Reverend Junious, to Denise for putting together this great panel. Faith leaders kind of reflect on today's reality. And joining us today is Dr. Phuc Lu, who is the author, teacher, and theologian, pastor, and community builder. We'll talk more about him and his great work and a book that he has out. Our good friend, Reverend Laura Mayo, who is the senior minister of Covenant Church and also part of the Faith Leaders Coalition, and my good friend, Elaine Denise Junious, who is the interim associate pastor at Resurrection Metropolitan Community Church. And so it's so great to have all the three of you join us here this evening for this conversation. I'm just going to start off with an open questioning, and you can take it wherever you want to take it, because I think it kind of sets the frame for the discussion, whether we're talking about any issue currently around us. And I guess it's just, why does it seem so hard, other than the three of you, why is it so hard for faith leaders and for church leaders of all denominations to speak up on the given issues that are affecting us socially, economically, politically, ethically, morally? It seems like we're kind of in this holding pattern of people willing to step up to the plate, take the leadership and lead, speak up and talk about these issues in a very profound way as we used to do in time past. What are your thoughts and your perspective, opinions, viewpoints on why this is occurring or not occurring? What needs to happen? I know it's a broad question, it's open-ended, but it was intended to be so that each one of you from your own wonderful, wonderful experience and perspective can add to this conversation. So whichever one of you want to start, I'm not going to try to go down the line. Whichever one wants to start, we'll begin, and we'll just carry this conversation forward. Thank you. Anyone?
Well, Larry, thank you for having us. This is an exciting time and a very difficult time, especially given the news of today. And I think it's important to be able to reflect on, who we are, the soul of this nation, and what we stand for. And I do think that I can't understand or explain why many people are reluctant to speak publicly about the issues that are happening today. But I do believe that it is a matter of integrity. I do believe it's a matter of being able to understand what's at stake and who's at stake. And so today, we must take a stand. We must take a stand for the soul of this nation. We must take a stand so that we all have an opportunity to live a whole and wholesome life.
Thank you. Dr. Mayo?
I'll just echo what Reverend Junious said and say thank you for having us on. And I think there's actually more speaking than is being heard. And part of that is there seems to be this idea that there's one voice of faith when there's not. And it's often the progressive voice that's not being heard, which, inspires us to speak all the more loudly and to shout even. I do think we are speaking, and I agree with Denise that it's a matter of integrity. It's not a choice. We must speak out. And one of the things I'm striving myself to do more is to say, not only do I think, for example, that abortion is a right, but I think that because of my faith, because I believe that God created all human beings and wants us to have bodily autonomy, it's part of my faith. So I've been speaking loudly, but I'm not sure I always was saying it is because of my faith that I have this stance. It is because of my faith that I want to be anti-racist. It is because of my faith that I believe in the right to choose. So, thinking about ways to amplify the voices that are speaking in a culture where when someone says the word faith, we're given a much more conservative or fundamentalist viewpoint when that has never been the only viewpoint of faith.
Good point. Thank you. Michael Lou?
Yeah, so I think that clergy at this time have only two choices. We could either play a prophetic role in our society and speak out against the injustices that we see and the injustices that were talked about by both of my pastoral colleagues here, and also to advocate for those who are not in power, who have a voice, but who those voices have not risen to the top, and so we could stand with those who are crying out and acknowledge that God hears them also. The other option is to not be a prophet for our society, but to be what many have called a chaplain for the empire, and that is meaning marrying faith with nationalism, with political might in ways that are destructive, and not to really acknowledge the needs of those who are underprivileged, those who do not have power in our society. So I see that those are the choices, and it takes a lot of courage. It takes it takes a lot of strength to do the former, to stand up and be that voice, and not cower to political and social power.
Let me pick up on your theme, because I think you are onto something. This is what I was thinking as I was sitting down preparing to be with the three of you this afternoon. The role of the prophetic voice, the prophetic role. I think that is the role, in my estimate, going back to looking at through history and the theological movements from liberation theology to Black theology to feminist theology, that in the times that we're in right now, it seems to me that prophetic voice is the voice that we need to be so loud, so clear, so crystally focused, so timely in its utterances, that it continues to be like deafening in our ear, that we can't get away from that sound. That, it seems to me, what is needed at this time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we've heard those voices, of course, in the African American church here in the United States, especially during the civil rights movement, but even going back to the time of slavery, and really trying to advocate for a real liberation, the liberation of people, both socially and economically, But again, the prophetic has been eclipsed by those who seek to join with the empire, and that is disastrous for people of faith, because the empire at times does not have the needs for those who are powerless, um, uh, at the very center. And so yeah, I do agree. That's why we need it so much more today.
Denise, Dr. Reverend Mayo, what's your thoughts?
Yes, I certainly agree with that, and I think that's the part that is so sombering, is that there are so many people who are hurting, there are so many people who are grieving, and there are so many people who are calling out, and it's important for those of us who are clergy, those of us who are people of faith, to reach our hands out and to support each other in that way, and not to get caught up in this philosophical debate about who's right and who's wrong. It's about who's human. And there's just a basic understanding that when people are in need, that we walk with them, we show our compassion, and we are present with them, and that is the message of the Jesus way, or the God way, or what people of faith do. And I believe that we are in a crisis of faith right now, and we have to be able to be very clear about what we stand for. And if we stand for people, then we need to be able to come together despite any of our political aspirations, and stand for the change that needs to happen, so that people can that people will come to know that they are dear, they are loved, that they are cared about. And I agree with Dr. Lu in saying that it is the empire and it is the power that is getting in the way of common sense thinking.
Reverend Mayo?
I would just add, we do need our prophets, and we do have our prophets. We also need our minor prophets, right? It's all of us being willing to risk and being willing to be countercultural in a culture that, as Denise has just outlined very well, that is not prioritizing human life, but is rather prioritizing capitalism and the empire. And it's going to take all of us. So it's not that I disagree. We certainly need those loudspeakers that years from now will be recorded. My face is not going to make it into history books, but I'm hoping I'm one of the minor prophets, right? I'm hoping that enough of us speaking in the ways that we can speak to our families. Do you know how much risk that takes? To our families, saying around the water cooler at work, like, that's not okay. I don't agree with you because I am a person of faith. I don't agree. This narrative of what it means to be a Christian specifically right now, it's so tied to nationalism. It's so tied to these things that I don't see in Jesus. I don't find these ideas in the Gospels. Over and over again, we're told throughout the Bible, First Testament and Second, to care for the poor. We don't have to agree about the Bible to agree on that. Okay, let's work on that. Let's care for the poor. Anyway, minor prophets are important too.
No, I totally agree with you. But the question I always have when I'm talking about leadership, whether it's political, religious, or community leadership, to take the lead, to be a leader, what happens when you take the lead, you have to answer questions about your choices. Where do you stand? What are your values? Do you really think that all human beings are equal? Do you see life being the same for all human beings, regardless of any other label? That is a point where we are in this country. We have never been able to say that. You know, to me, that's always been a basic baseline thing we've never been able to talk about. And that is, what is the fair, moral, ethical treatment of all human beings? What does that look like? What's that baseline? If we can establish that baseline and agree what that baseline is, then I can talk about the two antecedent questions that go with that. All human being lives matter. All human beings are equal. We can't even agree, nor have we had a full discussion about the first one. So we're kind of caught in this, it seems to me, in 2022. I'm a child of the 60s. I feel like I'm reliving 1968 all over again. Because when Dr. Lou said the empire, the first thing that came to my mind was the vision of the evil empire. The evil empire is being fed by what we're not doing: church, parish, temple, synagogue, and mosque, Friday, Saturday, Sunday worship. This prosperity gospel that we've all bought into gives the empire the foot that it needs in the door to continue to do its work. So I think it's all those things that we have to connect the dots on. And that's why I was so excited about having the three of you, because you live this every day. You've worked it. I've followed you. I know you. I've looked you up. I've researched you. I've talked to other people. I know you're living and doing this every day. So the question becomes, how do we inspire? I love your comment, Reverend Mayo, about the minor prophets. The minor prophets are just as important in this work as the major prophets. But how do we inspire, whether it be minor or major prophets? How do we inspire them? It's all about empathy. How do we get people to have radical hyper empathy and care about other human beings? That's the piece that's missing.
So, Larry, what I want to comment on is the fact that, you know, the thing that is saddens me is that there are many people that I talk to who actually agree on the same thing, but are reluctant to agree in a public setting because of whatever they risk or feel that they have to lose.
Fear, okay.
And correct. And we have to create the kind of opportunities for people to really be more courageous and willing to be public about how they really feel, and know that it's okay for us to have the dialogue, have the conversation.
Yeah. So our job is to create a safe crucible, right? That safe crucible where we can have the trust and respect to have those hard conversations, those critical conversations. That's what we're called to do. We don't do enough of those. I agree with you.
Your point about empathy, I would add, just to echo the fear, when we're afraid, we're not empathetic. And our culture right now is telling us to be afraid of the other, whatever in that cultural moment the other is, but to, to fear. And in that fear, people who would ordinarily be empathetic people are not able to access their love and kindness, and are focused in their fear on the other and how the other means to take their whatever, take their job, take their place in society, take. And it's all fear driven. And in that fear, people cannot, to your point, access their empathy. And so one of the things we just have to figure out, I think all of us, but especially faith leaders, is how do we address this fear? How do we say, okay, you're being told to be afraid of things that are not, this is made up fear. It's made up to control you. And I don't know how I don't know how we help people move through their fear. I mean, action is a great counterpoint to fear. How do we help people to move to their best selves, to be called to their best selves? And I don't have big answers, but I know one answer is to start with ourselves. I mean, I've got work I've got to do in me, right? Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. I've got my own things I've got to work on. And when I work on those things, that helps my fear. And when I'm working on my fear, I can help others with their fear. And that helps us all be more empathetic.
Yeah. Yeah, because if we say that empathy, that there is no equity without empathy. Uh, the road to equity is empathy. And so we find ourselves in 2022 having the same discussions we had in 68 about inequities, inequalities, about poverty, about injustices, about all those things, because the empathy bar has not been able to be raised.
Mhm.
And so it hasn't risen much, hasn't changed much. And to your point, exactly, people are fearful because of misinformation, outright lies, disingenuous, call it nicely if you want to call it nicely, disingenuous. And so how do you counter that? What's the way we used to counter it, seems to me, and I'm just, reflecting on my age now, was from those sermons and homilies that you heard from the pulpits on Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The captive audience known as the pew people, the prophetic voice that would try to stand in the well and try to counter all of that negative stuff that we knew was being said and articulated all week with what is true gospel values. What is the real truth? There's only one truth. What is the real truth? And that was done sometime with such zeal, such clarity of voice, such forcefulness, that it was able to drown out all of that nonsense from the week, all that noise of what was untruth. It just seems to me, again, we've lost that. I spend my time this last year going around to different churches and denominations on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just to try to hear that voice. I don't see it. Now, that's not a put down of church and religion or institutions. It's just that we as minor prophets or major prophets, I question myself, do I do it enough in my own life with my sphere of influence in my circle? I probably don't. I'm trying to do a better job of it. I'm trying to stand up and speak out about these things. But I think that's where we are. It saddens me. I mean, what you hear now is a 75-year-old person who has fought this stuff all his life, who now sees that the inroads have been, not much have changed. Not much has changed. I'll stop there. Y'all are the guests. I'm talking too much.
Well, Larry, I also want to just acknowledge that, given the time we're in, the fact that we're where we are with this pandemic, the suffering that has occurred, the grief that's ongoing, there's a lot really, really going on. And leadership starts with humility. Leadership starts with being able to say that, in ways that the scripture has been or text in the Bible has been interpreted in the past, have been used in so many ways, and ways that have not been helpful and could just say harmful, and the corrections need to start. And so that's one of the things that I have spent a lot of time doing is making sure that I help people to say that it's, as much as it's important to learn, it's also important to unlearn
Right.
some of the traditional ways of looking at what has been said in the past and how we use it to support humanity and not to do harm.
Good point. Others, please.
So one of the things that I've noticed, and it's become more prevalent, is the ideological divide that we have here in the United States, especially right now. But at the same time, what we've been seeing is just undercovering something that has been there, like you said, Mr. Payne, back in the 60s, and even before, that this
Right.
really has been a divided nation. There's gapping, chasms of divide, but we've covered it up with maybe being nice to each other, or the nation's doing well economically, but really we've not addressed a lot of the major issues of inequity in our country, and now because of the pandemic and Supreme Court justices and other social and political factors, all that has been uncovered, and revealed to us, and now it's, we're in a crisis, right? It's horrible, especially today. Reverend Mayo just alerted me to the fact that Roe versus Wade was overturned,
Yep.
and
Yes.
I did not believe that it could be done, in my lifetime, but it was, and so we see Second Amendment things also, just a lot of things that on really, we as a nation, the majority of people would side for the right of women to make those decisions. The majority of people would side on reasonable ideas about guns, about laws pertaining to guns, but somehow a division has been made, again, to side for the few that are very powerful, and not really the majority that want these rights, and wants to be safer. And so, in other words, I think something has happened. Something has happened.
Right.
And
Stop there.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to cut you off. I'm sorry. They're giving me my cue. We're running over. We ran over. Let me just say thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off. Here's what I'm going to suggest. We got about 30 seconds left, so I'm going to talk very quickly. I knew this was going to be a teaser. I knew a half hour wasn't going to be long enough. I knew this was just going to be a great start. So let me suggest that through maybe the Faith Leaders Coalition, we get together. Let's plan a half-day conference. I can get the University of St. Thomas to host us. We'll have a half-day conference. We invite folk to it, both Zoom and in person, and really have a great discussion along with other faith leaders. Where should we go? What is spirituality's response to the social, economic, and political realities that are affecting our lives today? That to me is kind of in a nutshell. We can do this in a great way. I want to thank you all. I apologize for starting a little late. I apologize for running over it and cutting it short. But I knew in my heart that this half hour was going to go by very quickly and that it wasn't going to be enough. So thank you all, Reverend Mayo. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Dr. Lau. And we were going to continue this. Let me just end with this. We look forward to you joining us in future segments of Dialogue Houston. We'll continue to have this great dialogue. I tried to find a scripture that kind of would sum up the close for this one, and it was very difficult, but I came up with this one from Hebrews. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we cannot see. So as we go forward on faith with hope and through action, hope has action attached to it, as Dr. Mayo said, Reverend Mayo said, we're going to take the action steps necessary to bring hope into a little bit more reality, to give hope to alleviate fears, and to try to get people to understand their role. We got to get out of here. They're telling me I got to go. So until always, stay safe, be well. Until we see each other next time, as always, peace, power, and love.